Good afternoon. This is the July 19 Harbor Management Commission meeting. This is Kim Taylor, the chair. I'm in the first floor conference room at Sullivan Independence Hall with the harbor master, Brian LeClaire, with our consultant, Jeff Stedman, with vice chair, Jack Herschler, with Commissioner Don Hyman, and I have appointed Jeff Warren, our alternate, to serve as a full commissioner so that we have a quorum for this meeting this afternoon. We will start the meeting. I'm calling it to order. We will start the meeting by pledging allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America.
Republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. And may I just note for the record that our mooring contractor, Jeff Engborg, manager of Pequot Yacht Club, has just joined us in person here as well. So the first order of business this afternoon is to approve the May minutes, which everyone received last week, and thanks to great help from Betty and Jeff, we were able to get the June minutes to you all earlier this morning as well. So could I have a motion to approve the May 17 minutes as written?
So moved.
Jeff moves.
Second.
And Jack seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. And for the June 21st minutes, could I have a motion to approve them as presented?
So moved.
Don moves. Could I have a second?
Second.
Jeff seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Both pass. Excellent. Okay. Thank you for that, everyone. So the chairman's report, as you can see, after our last meeting, at Don's suggestion, I contacted Josh Rabella, who was a reporter for the Connecticut Post and other local newspapers, and to just let him know that we had an annual report and to query him about his interest in that, as well as his interest in the harbor safety drill that Pequot and our town first responders conducted last month, and just to let him know that more information was available if he was interested. Unfortunately, he didn't indicate much interest. So, but at least he knows that it happens, and maybe next year we'll contact him in a more timely fashion, and he might be more interested closer to the date of the actual events. On June 23rd, that should be 2022, not 3033. Sorry about that typo in the chairman's report there. Jeff and I met with Joe Salvatore, who is the fellow on the Connecticut Port Authority, who is in charge, who will we be working with should we apply for additional SHIP grants, which are available from the Connecticut Port Authority to help municipalities do work in and around their harbors, and we will follow up more about that meeting under the old business Lower Wharf. On June 29th, Jack Herschler, in my absence, attended a meeting with the town engineering department to begin to discuss the town's plans to repair the wall at Perry Green, and I'll ask him to report to us more fully on that meeting under new business. On July 6th, Jeff and I were invited by the representatives of DEEP looking into the permit application for the dock at Kenzie Point to join them and the developers of the 1133, 1155 Sasko Hill Road development to walk around and take a look again at the site where the proposed dock would go. Race was also there. And we can again discuss that under old business. On July 8th and 12th, I contacted Mary Mayo, who was the town webmaster, just to see what kind of traffic our annual report and the links that Jeff included to the three presentations, what kind of interest was indicated by folks going to those links. to take a look at what those presentations were. I can tell you that unfortunately she said that nobody looked at those 3 links. We did have some activity on the website, but she was able to find, at least in June, that there was no activity on those PDFs. She did have some trouble running an analytics report, so it took her a couple of days to get back to me, so I don't know. I haven't gotten back to her. I thought I would chat with you all first and come up perhaps with some questions to present to her, and then I would be happy to get back to her just to see what, if anything, she thought that represented. Yeah, Don?
I can speak to at least 3 people who did look at it. Myself went to that link, and 2 people I know in community sailing went to it and
Good.
looked at it and discussed it with me after
Great.
reading it, because our president sent the link around for people
yeah.
to look at. So,
And my husband went. I'm sure that there are other people who went. So I do want to get back to her, but I just thought, well, before I get back to her myself, I would just survey and see what the collective wisdom was and what it was, if anything, that we needed to follow up with her and to try and get a better read on kind of what happened. And then finally, on July 7th, Steve Sternberg from Race sent Jeff an updated updated list of costs for the work that had previously been permitted at the Lower Wharf, and we can discuss that again. A lot going on down at the Lower Wharf. Unless there are questions about that now. Any other questions, thoughts? Okay, so then let's move ahead to the Harbor Master's report.
Cam, this is Sam Cargill. I'm present, listening only on a train.
Will you be able to participate? Sam?
Yes, I'm on mute. I'll do my best. But I'm listening. I'll do whatever I can.
Okay, all right. Jeff Warren, I'm very sorry. Stand by. If the train goes in a tunnel, we might need you again. Harbor Master's report.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Harbor's beautiful. I know you've all been down there. It's filled with boats. Youth program is active at the club. You see the little boats going out all the time. The Ideals, the Dyers, it's looking good. Right now we have 2 open moorings. They've both been offered. They've both been verbally accepted. We're just waiting for the documentation to come in. We have 1 new boat that has come in on the waiting list claiming riparian rights. It's a new owner of a property on Harbor Road. Is looking to jump to the top of the list with his vessel. Occupancy, all boats are in the harbor except for 2, and I've notified them because we have the July 15th date is when the boats need to be put in. So I'm going to see what their response is regarding their failure to put their vessels in. As you know, we have 1 boat in the harbor based upon a commercial fishing status, which gives it priority under the harbor management plan. I've reached out to the owner requesting his June fish catch reports, as well as his daily catch reports for the month of July to make sure it is in fact being used for commercial fishing. I took a look at the boat and I didn't see any indication looking at the boat that there was any equipment on it for fishing. So we will stay on him, and I've warned the individual that if the boat is not used for fishing, his mooring permit will be revoked and he has to remove the boat. Regarding stationing of the boats, all except 5 are in the correct position in the harbor. We have 2 that are switched, actually 4 that are switched. They're all aware that they're in the wrong spots, but they're working it out with their neighbors. And 3 are in the wrong position because 1 boat pulled up 1 short and it made the rest of the line off 1. So they're going to be like dominoes, 1 at a time, moving their boats back. No big deal. No complaints about that,
Good.
obviously. Since the last meeting, there was an Ideal 18 accident about 10 days ago where an Ideal 18 under sail rear-ended a moored power boat on the midwall. due to distraction by a bald eagle flying over the harbor at a low altitude, apparently. The owner, it's owned by the Pequot Yacht Club. The operator reported it immediately. The yacht club has taken responsibility, and they've been in touch with the owner. I've spoken to the owner and the club both. Everything's being handled to the party's satisfaction regarding repairs to the power boat that's there. We towed one Ideal in last Saturday, who was having trouble making his way back to the dock. Not a Pequot boat, but a community sailing boat. And we picked up two swimmers Sunday night, who we found swimming in the water just approaching 9 o'clock with no way to get back to shore, way too far out. So we got them to a buoy, got the boat in close, and took them back and notified their parents. So other than that, things are well. We've been out there a lot, meeting people, just patrolling around, chatting with people, reminding kayakers and paddle boards they can't stay in the middle of the channel all the time, especially when boats are coming, to keep it clear. We've coordinated with the Fairfield Police to keep young people from jumping off the pilings and swimming across the channel and interfering with vessel traffic. That's Nero, as you know, and boats cannot stop and turn around them. So we'll be working with them to eliminate that swimming. And that's basically my report.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the harbor master? Jeff?
The property owner who's filed for riparian status, where is that property?
It's I believe it's 1120 Harbor Road, if I'm giving the right address. 1120, I'll give you the address. It just came in yesterday.
But is it upstream of the yacht club, or is it?
No, it's the other direction. Towards the Sound. I believe it's the house that the gentleman just sold, who relinquished his mooring a month or two ago. Mr. McMahon, I think it was, who gave his mooring back, who was moving. I believe that's the house.
Mr. McMahon, isn't it?
Mr. McMahon, it was McCann, wasn't it?
McManus?
McMahon?
It was a McCann, I think.
McMahon property is the one
Hold on.
across from the lower wharf.
Yeah. Out here.
That donated the property.
Maybe I've given you the wrong name. Hold on.
That's
Let
the
me
strip of land
check.
into the
Right,
water.
right.
Give me a second. Yeah. No, I'm sorry, not McMahon. I'm sorry. That's 1088 Harbor Road. No, that's a doctor. Give me. I'll come back. Do you want to come back?
Okay, yeah, we can.
I don't have my laptop fired up. So
Okay.
I can't.
Okay. Any other questions for the harbor master? Okay, thank
It was
you.
McMahon.
McMahon.
McMahon. Yeah, SW07. He was on SW07.
McMahon.
It's interesting. That little.
Brian Thomas McMahon.
Yeah.
He was the one involved with the transaction.
Isn't that that's the property where the donated the property to the town?
To the town, but kept a strip of land that goes to the water.
Correct.
That's the argument about the height of
the height of the bushes.
The bushes and that property. It's also the property with the incomplete stairway that was promised to
Correct.
the town.
Correct. Correct.
That obligation
Well, that,
flows to
with the land, it doesn't
with the
go.
land,
Yeah.
the new buyer doesn't
Yeah.
have obligation.
Yeah. Okay, super. Any other questions for the harbor master? Super, okay. So moving right along to the lower wharf, a lot to chat about there tonight. Let me just start by saying that Joe Salvatore invited, or Jeff suggested to Joe Salvatore that after a meeting that he had further west in the state and on his way back east, that he stop by and take a look at the lower wharf, since the SHIP grant that we applied for and got several years ago came from the Connecticut Port Authority, and since we have been discussing the possibility of repurposing that money to repair the lower wharf wall and the piers, Jeff suggested that Mr. Salvatore just stop by and take a look and get the lay of the land, as it were. So we met with him and took a look at discussed the projects that we have been talking about, that is repairing the wall and repairing the piers. When the Harbor Commission originally applied for the grants in 2016-17 timeframe, the most part of the application included requesting money for dredging around the launch ramp, which this commission decided not to pursue, I think last fall, simply because it was not going to benefit that many people, and there was no cap material that we could have, that we were required to use to dump the material that we were going to dredge from that area of the lower wharf. So we asked Mr. Salvatore to come take a look. He took a look at the piers. He took a look at the wall. He suggested that we apply for additional monies in case the cost estimates that we had from RACE, that again were back in 2017, 2018 timeframe, in case that those cost estimates were not going to be sufficient to do the work that we want to do, and that the money that we had was not going to be able to be repurposed fully because there wouldn't be enough of it. So he invited us to apply for more grants with the caveat that the town would be required to contribute 20% of the cost of whatever the work was. And he said in some cases he is willing to waive that, but because in Fairfield and Southport that he felt that would not be fair to the other residents of the state to waive that 20% requirement. So Jeff and I went back to Steve Sternberg at RACE and requested an update on the cost of just doing the wall and just doing repairing the wharfs. And unfortunately, it's significantly more money that RACE estimates is required than what we have left over from the unused funds for the dredging. If we take Mr. Salvatore's advice and take a look at the projects, break out the projects, the wall project from the repair projects of the wharf, interestingly, we may have enough money to do the wall work. But it looks like repairing the two wharfs, it would be a significant amount of money, in the $500,000 range. So with that background, Jeff and I have been talking about this, and the concern is how do we, and I don't know where do we get the town funds that would constitute the 20%?
100,000.
Well,
$500,000 for the part that's not covered?
Well, the wall is roughly 160,000 is the estimate from RACE. We can afford that because we have money left over from the dredging grant. So I would like to, I'm going to get to the end and then we'll backtrack a bit. I would like the commission to think about moving ahead with the wall project, because if we don't have a wall, then nobody's going to, and that ground is crumbling, then getting access to the piers is probably not going to work. And so if we can proceed with that, it does appear that we have enough funds. We don't know what the town is going to require or be able to contribute, if anything, number one. And number two, we have not broached with Mr. Salvatore whether or not we would need the 20% to be part of the wall repair. Now, when we did the dredging, when we had the proposal for the dredging, the town contributed a significant amount of money to that project. So that was, the town bought the ramps, installed the ramps, bought the crane equipment, all of that came from the town, and that was how we got to the 20%. But the wall is a different project, and our concern is that Mr. Salvatore will think that it's a different project and that the town would have to contribute 20% of whatever fund, whatever the cost is, in order to comply with the Port Authority requirements. So, long-winded way of saying, okay, Jeff, you could take over, and what did I miss?
Well, very interesting, because the Port Authority was looking for projects that they could fund. They have authorization to spend $5 million each of the next 5 years on projects such as this, including feasibility studies, but ours is a construction project. So we originally started talking about repurposing the we received a grant from the Connecticut Port Authority in 2017 of $266,000, which was going to go towards the dredging of the area between the boat ramp and the lower wharf and out here. And as Kim mentioned, we've not been able to do that, even though it's gone out to bid. We haven't been able to find the cap material, and we've come to the conclusion that the benefit of that is not worth the money, and that was agreed to by the Port Authority. So then the next thought, I'm repeating, Kim, what you said, but it was to repurpose that money, which we need approval from the RTM to do, because the RTM accepted the grant in the first place. So we asked Mr. Salvatore to come and take a look, and he said if maybe that's not enough, you should apply for more money this year if you need more money. And that's when we got the estimate from Race, and actually the total estimate, opinion of probable cost, is $787,000, which includes the seawall at $160,000, the north pier at $232, and the south pier and deck at $220, and then there's mobilization and demobilization. So I gave this to Mr. Hurley, the town engineer, to see what he thinks and if there's ways to maybe get more value out of what we're proposing to do. He thought that the town had done some work on the south pier at one time. But then the question became, if we're going to repurpose that money, part of our cost share to get the grant for the dredging had to do with the work the town was going to do to continue to improve the boat launching ramp, which we're not going to do anymore. So Mr. Salvatore agreed that we have to have a different cost share that's relevant to what we're proposing to do. So I guess that there's several questions, but it even gets more interesting, because when we applied for the original grant, or first started to plan this project, as Kim mentioned, the town had spent over $100,000 in rental of equipment and materials for doing the work on the boat ramp to start with. And that was all part of this overall comprehensive project. It was all under one permit. So maybe we could make the argument that should count as the cost share, the 20% for the repurpose. But we hadn't thought of that. We only saw what we put in for that dredging project. So that there may be some room to negotiate with the Port Authority.
Yeah, you could argue that it's double counting. We've already given the 20%.
Right.
We've already given more than 20% as part of the overall project.
Right.
So I think we have to talk about that, and then also decide if we want to pursue, as Kim said, just the repairs on the wall itself at this time. With the money that's already, and then we would have an opportunity next year to apply for a, but we were not able to apply this year because we couldn't definitively say what the cost share was going to be. So that's where we are. What do we do about this project that's been going on for many, many years? So we have a cost estimate, we have a potential source of additional funds, we just don't know what to do. I'm going to call Joe, Salvatore, I'll call him tomorrow. And so I had mentioned all of this money that the town put in initially into the boat ramp, which was all part of the one comprehensive project. So could that count as the cost share for the lower wharf?
We're talking about the same money still.
Yeah.
With respect to that left over.
Correct. And as Jeff pointed out, it was all from the same permit. The wall, the piers, and the dredging was all part of the same permit. The grant, however, was not. The grant was for the dredging, not for the wall and not for the piers. So.
But that's what we have to talk about. But I think that the Port Authority will be agreeable to continuing to discuss this with us. And the question is, can we do it without? They're fine with repurposing the money, but the question came up about the cost.
It's the cost share that's the issue. And certainly, if the wall is $160,000, I mean that's within our we have that, if we can settle the cost share issue, we have that money.
But it would be a little more, because there'd still be mobilization for, you
Right.
know, and
Right, but,
construction oversight work.
but as compared to the cost for
Yeah.
each of the piers, which are, you know, almost $250,000 each, without any of that other stuff.
I'm sorry I couldn't figure out how to work this, because we put together some photographs of the wall and the piers. Maybe we can send that to everyone
Okay.
after the meeting.
Okay, okay. So, thoughts, questions?
I guess if we don't have the answer, if we get the answer that they're open to the notion that we've already contributed our 20%, and we can repurpose what's left over for the wall, I think we should plan to, as you've recommended, to proceed with that portion for which we've got funding and we've got pricing now, and split it off from the other piece, which is going to be more troublesome to find the funding for.
Well, it was interesting, Mr. Salvatore said in our conversations with him that if and when we applied for additional grants, that we should break out the wall work from the pier work. So I was simply thinking about what he said, and there's the money, and there's his recommendation for how to think about the project, so.
If they're not amenable to the idea that we've already contributed our 20%, then we have to regroup, because then we don't have the 20% of the cost of the wall repair.
Right.
And I'm not sure we'll get it. It's not appropriate that we use 102 account money for that.
I don't think so.
This is the infrastructure for the town. It's not really
Yeah.
maintenance of the harbor.
Yeah, I don't think so. I would be troubled by that. And I don't know, and maybe you can, the ARPA money that's going. Right, but that's going to be financing the Perry Green. I mean, do we know anything about that? Whether there's anything.
Project has to be done by March, though, for ARPA funds.
Just talked with Mr. Hurley about that too, and about the possibility that if there's some money left over from that, could we apply this? And he said, I wouldn't count there's gonna be any money left over, but who knows? We haven't explored that, or whether a grant for that could be used as the cost share for another project. Probably have to get permission, but then we can keep that in mind.
It's my understanding that the projects that are funded with ARPA money, that they all need to be completed by March.
By March?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think they're gonna get this one completed by March, because they need to get the permit.
Maybe it's by the permit or planning
They haven't applied for the permit, and that could take months. Or maybe, well, but the point is, the engineering department will work with us. Mr. Hurley's reviewing the cost estimates. If I was to tell him that we would like their engineering's assistance in figuring out how we could perhaps just do the wall repair. I wish I had the slides.
So I guess my question is the consensus of the group that we proceed with trying to get something started, i.e. the wall, down at the lower wharf?
I would support that.
That's
I mean, we've had this permit since 2017, and we have very little to show for it, and Mother Nature is taking its course down there, and so. Okay, Jeff, that'd be great if you could call Mr. Salvatore and just see what do we do about cost sharing with money that we already have in the bank, and.
Have you read some of the ongoing travails of the Port Authority?
Sure.
Or have you seen it in the
Yeah,
paper?
yeah.
Oh,
Do you want to report?
No, that's okay. I don't think it will it's affecting this particular grant program.
Okay.
It might affect the future of the Port Authority, but not.
All right. Are we ready to move on to sand management? Jeff?
I talked with Miley Bull again. I need to hear back from the Corps of Engineers project. I told her we would prepare a report. And I talked with Mr. Bull that I thought we would write the letter to the Corps instead of him, and just ask for his concurrence. And in the letter we would say that we've have no indication that there's been any nesting piping plover on this area since 2011, which is when we last understood that the birds nested there, based on what the Fish and Wildlife Service told us. And Mr. Bull has been there every year since we started the dredging project, and he's been there twice this year. So the nesting season, well, he's been there during the nesting season. The birds would arrive if they were to arrive in March, and they nest in April, and usually by July, if there are any birds that nested, and they would be gone. And so none have been observed, including in this nesting season. And we can make the argument, and whereas that to the west at Campo Beach and Westport, there are nesting birds every year, and Long Beach and Stratford, there are nesting piping plovers every year, according to Mr. Bull. So that this habitat should not be considered as I forget the term we use. It's not quite poor habitat, but it's something it's not good habitat that. And for the reasons that we've talked about, there's not much of it above the storm tide line. And for those reasons, that's the information that we were going to put into the letter that he would sign off on. And I wanted to ask the Corps' project manager if she thinks that there's any additional information. We have the photographs of the habitat that does exist. It's not much. We haven't calculated the square footage of it. But so I told Miley Bull that maybe next week we could have the letter and you could look at it and see if it's...
Okay.
Now, the Corps of Engineers did point out that they're getting pressure to move this ahead because they got money for it. So if that's... And they haven't yet... They were waiting, I don't know why they would wait, but waiting to pursue the ownership issue with their real estate division, because they wanted to get the plover issue out of the way first.
Okay.
And also, as you know, the DEP, when they were here, the DEP representatives didn't particularly like the idea of the dredge material going offshore instead of being used for beach nourishment. And the director of the Bureau of Aquaculture, whose this offshore proposal is his idea, he said he will write a letter supporting the use of the offshore site to enhance shellfish habitat as having an environmental benefit that's much more significant than using it on the beach. So we have to pull that together.
Do we know if he's done that yet?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
He probably hasn't because I didn't call him back and ask him for it.
Okay. And is there anything we can do to get the real estate division moving on the ownership question?
I think it's just the first thing, just submit the letter having to do with the piping plover, which we said we would do.
Okay.
Last month. And then let them move it forward.
Okay. Okay.
There's nothing more we have to do about that.
Okay. Well, they will contact the country club?
No, they're going to contact their own real estate division using the material that we've provided to them.
Okay. So they will take a look at the presentation that you did and make a decision, and the documents and make a decision?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
And it's quite interesting. Maybe I told you this last month, but in New London, there's a proposal, and it's a plan, it's going to go ahead, to establish the National Coast Guard Museum on the New London waterfront. You know, an attraction of national significance. But it requires filling of underwater lands. So one of the conditions in the permit is there needs to be a legislation passed whereby the state of Connecticut would transfer the ownership of the underwater lands to the U.S. Coast Guard. It's not unlike what was done,
right,
you know, back in the 1820s here with the transfer of the underwater lands to the federal government to build the jetty and the wall. Interesting. But anyway, that's...
Okay. Any questions for Jeff about the dredging or sand management? Okay, Jack, mooring committee.
The mooring committee met on the 12th, and the harbor master reported on the vacancies that he just reported to us, and also noted that he is actively tracking the docked vessels, particularly the docked vessels at private docks, to get those folks into compliance with the town's rules that all docked vessels be reported to the harbor master. we also had a discussion about a conversation with Justin Cathcart that I had with Brian, and Jeff actually joined by telephone accidentally by calling you over in the meeting, but it was helpful to have him in that as well. You'll recall we talked in our previous meeting about the 9 moorings that are administered today by the Parks and Rec Department at Perry Green, and we had just an exploratory initial discussion with Justin about whether it might make sense, particularly today when we have online mooring managing all the moorings in Southport, including those 9, but that those 9 are on a whole different administrative schedule with different fee structure than we have for all the other moorings in the town, that maybe it makes sense now to think about transferring the responsibility for those to the harbor master and to the Harbor Management Commission. The point that Justin made to us is that with all of his other responsibilities, those 9 moorings become late in his issuance of permits, and so we finished our work in January and February, and he begins to think about these moorings in the springtime in May. And so that's kind of late for reassigning any vacant moorings in the season for folks. It might make more sense to get on our cycle. The other thing is the Parks and Rec Department uses a scheme for charging by the foot of the boat. Ours uses a table where all boats within a range all have the same fee, and so they have a different fee structure accidentally than we have for all the rest of the boats in the harbor. So he was amenable. He was going to talk to his manager about whether that's something they'd be agreeable to. And Jeff offered to us that the deed from White Perry in 1957 is quite clear that while the assignment for the administration of those moorings was granted to the Park Department at that time, it was also clear in the deed that, or some other town entity like the Harbor Management Commission didn't exist at that point, would also be okay under the deed's terms. So, and so the harbor master is a state employee responsible for that, so that would fit also for the deed's terms. So there's no sort of legal barrier for that transition to occur. So that's an open issue now for Justin and Anthony to get back to us on that.
Okay. Do you have a copy of that deed?
We do. It's in the harbor management plan. It's appendix.
I have an electronic copy. I scanned
But
that.
it's one of the
I think I
appendices.
came across that not that long ago, not even putting it together with the Harbor Commission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of detailed with respect to limitations of benches and other things that are not permitted to be on Perry Green, and also with respect to the moorings. But it was clear that the moorings that are there can be administered by other than the Parks Department of 1957.
I'm not sure where I came across that. I think it was just like a loose piece of paper or something.
Yeah, I forget. I want to say it's the third appendix in the harbor management plan.
Appendix C? Why do I think appendix? Why am I remembering that? Thanks, Jack. Any questions about the mooring committee? Mooring issues? Okay, great.
I think one thing you mentioned, though, was that we could run afoul of the Army Corps of Engineers because those moorings are restricted to Fairfield residents, and that would
That's right.
be in compliance with the federal.
Yeah, the question, there is a question about whether any of those moorings are actually in waters that are in the federal anchorage or not. My sense was that they're shoreward of the...
We talked about that when we did the harbor management plan and all these issues about and it wasn't brought up then. And I think it was because of the deed, the restriction in the deed, that access to more boats through the green. We can give attention to it.
I mean, if we were to assume responsibility, would that make it more challenging to deal with the Corps on the dredging?
I don't.
I mean, God help us. We will do nothing to jeopardize that.
It wasn't an issue when we did the harbor management plan, the access through Perry Green. It was recognized that there were 3 waiting lists. One was the yacht clubs, the other was the town, and then there was the one with Perry Green. And we combined the yacht clubs and the town, but I have to go back and look at it. I don't.
Are these moorings in the federal anchorage, or are they shore? Are they to the shore side if it's sort of a moot point if they're not.
Well, we have the drawing. I don't have the drawing in front of me.
Yeah.
On the phone, I think.
Would we be able to tell us? Is there a line, demarcation line?
There should be a line. Isn't there a dotted line?
Oh, it's the mooring plan, Jeff, you know, that Ray did.
I've got it.
Yeah, but I don't think that has a definition for that. I think it shows the federal anchorage, though.
It shows the line, doesn't it? I mean, that's,
Might be better to leave sleeping till July if it's gonna raise an issue with the Army Corps of Engineers.
yeah,
No question.
yeah, no question.
I think it's the red line in this diagram. Does that make sense? It's sort of a red dotted line?
That's the index to the drawings, Jack, and then there are, you know, larger maps for each one of those, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this is suggesting that 12, 13, and 14 are not in the federal anchorage. It's suggesting that none of those boats are in the federal anchorage.
So that's races, what are you're looking at races?
So races, drawings, I don't know what the date is of these.
That they did,
2015, 14, 15. Revision. I think I got these from you maybe, Jeff.
well, didn't we look at those when we were online moorings?
This is what I'm looking at right here. This
Right.
red line right here.
Oh, yeah, they're all inside.
They're all to the Perry Green edge, and
Right.
in between, that looks like this is the federal.
Sure does, because look at the yacht club docks.
Right.
It's right, all the boats, the Perry Green boats and the yacht club boats are all inside the red line.
So here's what we're talking about. This
Yeah,
red line is the perimeter, and over here you
It
can.
wasn't an issue, I know we just
Okay,
discussed it.
good. Very good. Phew. Okay. Okay. Any other questions about the mooring committee? Moorings? Okay. Our Kenzie Point meeting was deep. John Short from the Shellfish Commission was also with us, and I know because he told me that he made it very clear to the folks from DEEP that the amount of work that goes into the beds, the shellfish beds, the what do they call it? Not planting the oysters and the shells, the clams, but bringing the clams.
The relay?
The relay,
Okay.
thank you. It's hundreds of thousands of clams and oysters that they stock those beds with, and that his concern, John Short's concern, was if they move too much of the rocks, that they would change the shoreline, and that there might be some damage to the beds, that there might be some bacteria from some of that old wood that would get into the beds, that if motorboats were ever used at the end of the dock, that the gasoline and that would destroy the beds. But if the users of the dock were to go to the south, off the dock, as opposed to going to the north or to the west, he would be fine with that. I know that he made his concerns clear to the folks from DEEP, and Jeff made it very clear that we were concerned, especially concerned, about what would happen, what would other property owners say when they moved in and saw that there was one dock, and they saw the development plans that said, oh no, you can only have one dock, and they go to their lawyers, and their lawyers say, oh no, you have littoral rights, you're entitled to wharf out. So my recollection is that the DEEP folks who are there will go back to their legal department and make sure that the legal department gives them some advice before making the decision. But Jeff, you had other conversations with Colin and Sue that you want to report on?
Well, of course, the DEEP is responsible for setting the precedent where they approved a dock in Greenwich that didn't attach to the land. And that's what led to the pending court case, which we're waiting to see. So it was quite interesting when one of the DEEP representatives expressed concern about that, and the other said, well, we've already done that, which is sort of interesting. And I'm sorry, I put together photographs of the site that I sent to you, Kim.
Yes.
You saw it. And I don't mean to take time, but the history of that property is very interesting, and I only know a little bit now because I got the Southport packet. It has the history of this going back into the 1800s and before. And we're calling it Kensie, but really the historical was Kensie', Kensie's, after someone named that structure on the shoreline is referred to in these historical writings as the beach house, not the boathouse.
The beach house.
And the boathouse is a 300-foot long stone wharf or dock that went out, and that was on a plan from 1898. It's not quite clear when they wrote it as if this was a dock that was built. But on the plan, it says location for dock, so whether it was actually built or not. But the dock, that old structure is there. The proposal that's before us is to remove that structure and build a new dock by what's called the beach house. And where the old dock was, there was what they called a boathouse, which had a canopy over the top of it. This is quite interesting. But the regal estate is when these current and the beach house was built. And so it's interesting that the estate project began, and the regal family was, like industrial, so that's what you call them. And this was a retreat for the summer fort. The estate project began in 1932 in a rather back-end-to fashion. The beach house was done first. Work probably early summer. They said that there's an inscription or a carving into the stone over the fireplace that says 1923, I think. So a cofferdam was built to keep out harbor waters while the foundation was put in place and the little structure erected. Family memories are that Ben wanted to see how well the Tudor style suited the site, as well as to study the effect of a particular kind of brick being used, the same brick that they intended to use in the big residence, which is sort of interesting. And then it goes on to say the dock and boathouse were built around the same time as the first beach house. The photo shows the considerable beach area of the time. And that's interesting because the 1934 aerial photo shows a big wide beach there. And it doesn't show the dock. But the descriptions of the dock in the late 1920s. So I don't know if something got damaged or, right. And then it's back in the photos in 1965. So the photo, and this is what they're referring to here, shows the considerable beach area of the time, later changed dramatically by hurricanes. And then there's a picture of Mr. Regal with a bell behind him, which apparently the beach was very popular with the visitors at the estate. So when they were going to have dinner, they'd ring the bell and everybody would come back up
from the beach.
But it's quite a fascinating history. But there are 5 lots that are been subdivided with water frontage, and you could see that there's. You could engineer it so that there could be a structure that doesn't quite attach to that, where that conservation restriction is, and you could have five docks going out. But anyway, but we only have one to look at. Kenzie, Kenzie'. So that's what I think I'll call it from that one. Sorry to take your time.
No, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Fascinating history.
So any questions about our meeting with the folks at Kenzie Point?
We said that we were going to write a letter to DEPO as well, right? At the last meeting?
We did, and...
Do you think that's necessary to do?
Well, I asked, Devin Santa was also there, and I said, so why are the DEPO people here, and what's the status of the application? And he said, well, they're really here because the application, the application, if I understood him correctly, has not actually been submitted. that the Race people have been before aquaculture and shellfish and us, and have been before several other people with a stake in the waters and the dock building and all of that, to present the proposal and ask for their comments. And that then all the comments, including the letter that we wrote, will be bundled together and sent off to DEEP. And the purpose of this meeting, according to Devin, was that they would, DEEP would kind of look at the packet, if you will, and suggest if there were small or minor changes that needed to be made before the application was submitted. So from that, I concluded I mean, we certainly could write another letter if we want to. And if there's something that we didn't include the first time around that we need to include. But it was my understanding from that conversation that I
think the purpose of the letter was going to be to suggest that they come down and look at the area. And they've subsequently done that. I think if it's okay with you, I could send those photographs.
Sure, that's a good idea. Why don't you do that, send the photographs. And they did the same thing that they did with us in December. Somebody stood with the tape measure, and somebody from Race walked out into the water just so that the folks from DEEP could see not only the height that people could pass underneath it, but how far out into the water the end of the structure was going to go. So and I guess we were there for about an hour. Took the walk and pointed out the old stuff that was going to be removed and the new stuff that would go in, but the question of whether or not there could be other docks was really by subsequent owners of the property, was something that really occupied a lot of time and attention by everybody, including the developers. Jeff?
Because the tide makes a big difference when they're doing a visit like that, right? I mean,
right.
It's high tide is completely different.
Totally different. When we were at low tide, we were at low tide. But what's interesting is that the boathouse is high enough. The ramp will come out from the boathouse so that you can walk underneath it. The people coming from South Pine Creek will be able to walk around underneath the dock. So the shellfish folks have a concern about the timing of the construction, and they wanted to make it clear that from their point of view, that the only construction time acceptable would be the winter time, because the summertime would really mess up their beds and relays and all that sort of stuff. But
the old stone wall that goes along the property up by the beach house is interesting, because at several locations they built into the stone wall a seat, they sort of carved it out into the wall with a stone, base of the seat. Quite interesting, thinking that goes back 100 years.
Right, they're still there.
It's still there, yeah. And the beach house is not damaged in any way.
No.
Which quite interesting. So it's certainly
sound.
Yes.
Okay. Any other thoughts or concerns about Kenzie Point? If not, Lower Wharf benches, Mr. Cargill.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, Sam.
Sorry, I've been on a train. I'm back going to the city, so apologies for that. I also regret that we do not have an update. I haven't had a chance to meet with Mr. Sunman and Mr. Calabrese.
Okay.
And Kim, I'll call you offline on that as well, but
okay.
It's just coordination. Apologies.
Okay, no problem. Hope you're almost home.
Yep.
Good. Deputy Harbor Master search. Bill sent me an email about 4:00. Unfortunately, was being called into a surgery, and was not going to be able to attend the meeting by phone or in person. So we don't have an update on the Deputy Harbor Master search.
I'm on the subcommittee guy. I just asked one question. Is there a way do we have the job description from the last time for the Harbor Master? Can we get a editable copy of this? This is a PDF.
Kim, it's Brian LeClaire. I had my office today convert the PDF to a Word document, and earlier this afternoon I sent a red line of the Word document to Bill with my suggested rewrite to make it into a deputy harbor master position.
Okay. You want to send that to Jeff Warren as well?
Sure, I will do that when I shortly.
Okay. All righty. Super. Thanks, Brian. Okay. New business, the Perry Green Wall project. Jack?
3 weeks ago, I attended a meeting that Kim was not able to attend. Also attending, Jeff Stedman was there as well. This was a meeting hosted by the engineering department and really led by Race Engineering, describing in a very preliminary way to interested groups the initial thinking that Race had about approaching the wall at Perry Green reinforcement, rebuilding. And it was interesting. There's a lot of history about how that wall, from their research, appears to have been built and when, in terms of the stone originally from the early 19th century, and then following that in the teens probably of the 20th century, steel being put up in the majority of that face, which is, if you go out there and take a look at it, it's quite deteriorated. And the options that they considered for refacing and reinforcing that wall. Sounds like the recommendation Race is making for financial reasons is chiefly to do it with new steel facing, remove the old and leave the stone and put new facing in front, perhaps having to put some fill in between the existing stone and the new steel wall. There were lots of questions about alternatives to that. There were some questions about whether the part of the wall that faces towards the south as that curves around, if that piece that's visible from shore could be faced with stone or some kind of a facing of stone as an alternative, and what the additional cost might be for that, just from an optics standpoint. And Race is going to look at possible options around that. Jeff, am I missing anything? Jeff, you were there also. I think pretty much knows it. Yeah, I don't know that there was more. That was a very early sort of introduction to their thinking about it. They did some core testing of looked like in the water now, and also they had 2, I think, test holes on the green itself, just to understand what the composition was of the soil on the green itself that might be disturbed. Context of that. It was also clear to me that the engineering folks had taken a look at the deed that we just talked about, and were being sensitive to the deed restrictions that are in the 1957 deed.
So presumably that would be the same kind of work that would have to be done on the lower wharf?
I don't know. We'd have to think about that. But the Historic District Commission is involved with this.
Right.
So when you do work in a historic district, it has to be subject or be approved by the Historic District Commission. And that's one of the reasons what Jack was saying, when you're driving north and you see that face of that stone wall, if they were to change that and make it a steel pile or bulkhead, that would be probably wouldn't be agreed to by the Historic District Commission. Right.
It's a relatively short area. But today there's actually a little piece of it that's steel, and then it continues with stone after that.
It is different, Kim, because this is a bulkhead.
Okay.
The wharf has stones in it that are set. So we're not talking about replacing it. Where the Perry Green wall is deteriorated, you can see the old steel bulkhead behind it. And in fact, someone had a picture. It was what was it, Lehigh Steel Company or something?
So they had the patent pending on the steel section, and also they knew the company's name, and they knew the company went out of business in like 1922. So
it was
the result of that, they knew it was real.
1908 on it, but it's very, very interesting. But they have to do it in a way that conforms to the historic requirements.
So was the historic district represented?
Yes. And also, isn't there a shellfish person there also?
Yeah, I think so.
Too. Yeah?
And then another part of it, it has to be coordinated with the Pequot Yacht Club because the walls come together at the property line. And they would do it in the off-season.
Right, the winter, right?
Yeah.
It's, all of this is winter work.
There was discussion about the ladders and the attachment points for the several mooring attachments there. And the engineering department, my impression of the conversation was that we're thinking they would maintain those going forward. So that's part of the project.
Don?
We made an enlargement for the beams.
Did you have a question, Don?
Just a comment, and that is that, well, this may be obvious to everyone here. As you know, both those walls are potentially, when we move from concept of repair, replacement to reality and, these are newsworthy moments of potentially great interest in the community because they're so visible and they're so part of the texture of the area. So when that time, if that time comes.
This piece of steel right here.
Think about
You
that.
you got to remind me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be quite a project.
So this piece right here is what people were concerned about, this section right here. All the rest of this is steel deteriorated. And then it ends at the yacht club and goes back to stone, right? Yeah. So right along here where the fence is at the yacht club, it switches back over to that. And if you take a look at this or stand near it, it's very, very bad. It's got big holes in it, rust.
So what is the extent of the repair of the project?
It's the entire
That entire thing
base of Perry Green where all of that wall is
right up to the yacht club?
Yes.
Okay.
And around the corner to the south side, and that was where the discussion was of to make that whole wall refaced with stone of some kind.
Does the town have was the ARPA grant big enough to cover that? I mean, is there concern about money?
I know that.
Remember them discussing, do you remember them discussing the financing?
I just know when I asked Bill this afternoon if maybe there's some money left over.
He said there wasn't going to be.
Probably
You
won't
said
be
no?
any money left
Okay,
over.
well, that,
But this, can you mention, there's a concrete cap along the lower wharf.
yeah,
But it's on the top of stone.
right. And it's in bad shape.
Yes.
It's in really bad shape.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Jack, and thank you for attending. Any questions for Jack about that meeting or that project or? Is there any new business? Members of the public want to comment? Want to raise any issues? Commissioners on the line? Yep. Did I hear somebody wanting to comment?
Not from this part of the public.
Not from the harbor master.
Thank you, Brian.
Hey, Harbor Master, I was going to mention that I noticed right next to the signs that say no diving off the Pequot Avenue Bridge at Southport Beach, several kids jumping into the water again. So the warning signs apparently didn't deter them. So if you're talking to the police again, you might mention that they might take a look at that also on the warm days of the summer. We had them last night and prevent kids from doing it. There are already signs that have been put up, but it doesn't seem to have the desired effect.
We had on Sunday, we had 3 boys jump off the Lower Wharf Pier and swim across. And we literally stopped because they weren't making very good progress. We had a canoe behind us, another sailboat behind us, a motorboat behind us at about mid-tide. And one little boy was not a very good swimmer. It was terrifying. Terrifying. So it's happening all over town. Yeah. So if there's no new business, no comments, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Don.
Seconded.
And Jack seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We will see everyone in August.